All right, I was gonna do this here, but no, I'm gonna take you guys over here. And we're gonna sit down in my usual spot. By the way, how have you guys been liking this spot? Today the lighting's not great because it's quite gloomy outside. I'm relying on natural light, but for a while I was doing it inside my office, my episodes, and now I'm doing them here. I'd love to hear your opinion. If you don't mind this today, maybe not a great example because the light's not great. Anywho, today I'm going to talk about commercial photography. More specifically, I'm going to talk about what it's like to do a commercial photography shoot from start to finish. Not a technical episode. None of my episodes really are technical episodes. I'm just going to give you guys some insight into the world of commercial photography. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned and let's talk photography. So let me start with a little context about my business, about my commercial side of my photography. Many of you that follow my channel don't even know that I do that. I don't talk about that stuff as much, but it is what pays the bills. It is what bought me my apartment. It is what pays for me to live. We make money off of the other stuff, but it's a fraction compared to what we make from commercial photography. So I run a commercial photography and video production business with my wife, and we specialize in luxury hospitality shoots. So we do a lot of interiors, exteriors. We also do a lot of lifestyle shoots as well. One of our marquee clients is Intercontinental Hotels, and we're a preferred vendor for them worldwide. And we also shoot a lot of real estate development stuff and teaser videos and brand videos and things like that. And we kind of do everything. So we, in addition to doing the photography and video production, we handle models, their contracts. We handle pre-production, props, casting, wardrobe, everything. There's a lot that goes into it. So that's kind of my background. Again, like I said, a lot of people do things different ways in different types of shoots, and in even different regions, people do things different ways. And even throughout the course of my career, I've evolved to doing things quite differently than when I started. So today I'm just gonna go through kind of start to finish how a shoot sort of unfolds and what happens. So things typically start with an email from a client, and typically they find us through our website, Mott Visuals. And oftentimes they'll actually find me through my personal website, justinmott.com, which has my editorial and wildlife photojournalism work on it. And it's funny because I know they found me there because they'll reach out to my email, which is on there, that website. But on our Mott Visuals website, it's one of our producers' emails. So I'm like, you want to hire me to do a hotel shoot, but you didn't see any hotel work on my website. So I think that's kind of funny to me. It also shows you how green some of the people that are hiring you to do photo shoots are. I mean, they didn't really do proper research. Or sometimes you just have such a good reputation, hopefully that's it, that they just sort of were trying to find you and they trust that you do that work as well. I don't know, but it does happen. A lot of the photo shoots that we do, it's the team's first ever photo shoot, the marketing team's first ever photo shoot. Or at least it's their first ever photo shoot for that brand, because we do a lot of pre-opening shoots. So the hotel's about to open, that sweet spot, like about 2 months before it's about to open, when the rooms are kind of ready, things are ready to function, but there's no guests yet. That's the sweet spot. Those are the kind of shoots that we love to do. We do also like a refresh too for clients as well, that they did a renovation or they just need new visuals. But often these days, especially in this region, how much it's growing, we do a lot of pre-opening shoots. So it starts with an email to one of our producers, and typically it's by someone from sales and marketing, and typically they want a rushed quote. They'll send the email to our producers and they'll say like, we need a quote, can you have it by the end of the day or have it by tomorrow, and we need like X, Y, and Z. Or they might even just come with it and say, we have this amount of budget and what can you do? And we used to kind of work that way when we were small and just starting out. It was a little bit like kind of unorganized. It was all about like, oh, just get a quote back to them, get them a number that you think is like in the ballpark what they want to spend, and get the shoot. And now, since my wife sort of took over that side of the business, we're much more structured, much more organized. So we typically politely say, like, hold your horses. We have a lot of follow-up questions. A lot. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a quote. A quote takes a long time to build because we're going to have follow-up questions like, do you need a drone? Which region are you in? Are we going to have to hire a drone operator, or can we use our own? Because different countries, it might have to be licensed locally. Do you need models? If so, do you want locally sourced models? Are we going to fly models in? Do you understand that it costs money to do wardrobe? Do you want to just use staff? I mean, there's a million questions. Is it lifestyle shots? Is it product shots? Is it a mix of both? And we force them to work, and they have to work in order for this to happen. Sometimes they'll just come to us like, we just need photos. And like, yeah, well, you need to know a lot more than that. There's a lot more that you have to think about. We'll help them think about it. If they really need help, we can go through on a call and say, like, this is what we typically do, for this type of shoot. Or if it's a brand that we've worked with quite a bit, we'll know like, okay, these are kind of the shots you're going to need right away. This amount of lifestyle shots, this amount of product shots, and this amount of angles of each product shot. But when I say product shots, I just mean like room shots without people in it. Could be their actual rooms, the lobby, conference rooms, dining areas, things like that. Again, a lot of times people will rush that quote out. We don't. It's just not good for anyone, not good for them, not good for us, and it's just not how we operate. So if they don't have time for it, then we typically don't do the job. And if they need it by the end of the day, then they haven't planned well and they're probably going to be a mess to work with. I mean, things happen last minute, sure, but like these aren't the kind of jobs that we like to do, and it's a huge red flag. And then we come back to them with that quote, and then if they want to reduce things, sometimes we're just like way off, right? I mean, we're so high that like they don't even email us back, and that's fine too. And I think for you guys out there that are building your quote system, I'm not going to tell you like exactly what we charge for stuff, because there's people that watch my videos that like compete with me and they're always looking for little edges. So I'm not going to reveal that kind of information. I like to be open with you guys, but unfortunately, like there's a lot of people out there trying to sneak around. So we'll send the quote out and they might say, oh, well, we only have half of that. And can you just, they'll write back like, can you just do it for this? This is our budget. I'm like, well, no, like we can't just do everything we listed out for that price, because that was calculated based on what our subcontractors cost, based on all the logistics and travel and our rates and things like that. So we can't just like cut it in half. Like, do you just all of a sudden have people say like, oh, can I get your room for half the price? Like, no, we don't work that way. So we can cut a quote down, but by cutting the quote down, we're going to cut off work, so it's going to either be less models or no models, or less total shots delivered and less total days working. That's how it's going to work. So again, some people don't like that, and those people end up not working with us, and that's fine. I think as a business, you kind of figure out your sweet spot, and that takes a long time to get there, and it took a long time for us, but, because if you're sending out all these quotes and it's just never hitting, you're never landing jobs, then you got to change things. But for us, we found a spot that's like, this is what we want to make as a company for profit, and this is what we want to pay our subcontractors. Sometimes we use separate cinematographers. I have another photographer that shoots for us as well, and then we have a team of makeup artists, prop stylists, and things like that, and drone operators for certain countries. So all these things are factored in, and we've hit a sweet spot where we get enough work that we feel happy about that sweet spot, and we feel confident when we send the quote out that we're worth that. And if they don't think so, that's also fine. So that's the quoting part. Everything gets put into an Excel program. The client can see the breakdown. They can understand like what everything's gonna cost, and then if they want to shave off work because they don't have as much budget, then we do that and we'll work on that. So let's say we agreed on a price. Once we agreed upon the price, then we deal with the contract. We've got a standard contract that we've used for our business. We had a lawyer draw that up. I encourage all of you guys out there that have a business to have a proper contract. Work with a lawyer. It's a little bit of money up front, but once you have that contract in place, you can use it for the rest of your jobs for forever. I mean, every once in a while you might make amendments to the contract because you're going to realize like, oh shit, I didn't think of that, or I need to be covered for that. And I'll stop right there for a minute, guys, and take a moment to let you guys know that if you're enjoying this episode, if you don't mind hitting the like button, if you're really liking it, maybe you subscribe. And if you really like it, maybe you'll join my membership program for $4.99 a month, where you get bonus and exclusive content, and you get priority in the comments section for members only. Again, you can do that by hitting the join button for $4.99 a month. And guys, don't forget to check out my online store at justinmott.com, where I've got presets, I've got one-on-one classes, I've also got prints that make great gifts for the holidays, and lastly, I've got 5 slots left for my Northern Vietnam workshop. It's going to be epic. It's going to take place in Hanoi and in Sapa, so some cities, some countryside. It's going to be incredible. We're going to focus on street photography and travel photography. That's going to take place in March. You can book your slot right now by paying the deposit. Again, all the information for that is in the description box below, or you can just go to justinmott.com and click on online store. So once we agree on the price, then it's about signing the contract, and then even signing the contract, I don't necessarily believe that, and we don't do anything until we get a deposit. So we get about 65% up front of a deposit, and that's basically to lock all of our subcontractors as well, and that's paying for all the work we're going to start to put forward in pre-production. A lot that goes into, like most of what goes into a photo shoot is happening before we actually shoot, before I'm there with my actual camera. So we don't want to do all that work and then all of a sudden they cancel. So we require that deposit. I mean, there's no exception to the rule. We don't do any work. We're not going to do any casting. We're not going to book any of our subcontractors, our makeup artists, our prop stylists, anyone. We're not going to have them block off their time until we get the money. So once we get that deposit, and not even that deposit like, oh, we're sending it. The contract signed, so don't worry, we're sending it. Bull, BS. Don't do it. Until that money is actually in our account, we don't do any of the work. We'll communicate with the client, sure, but we're not going to do any work or lock any subcontract. So once the money's in and the contract's signed and we're all locked and ready to go, that's when we start full pre-production. So that's going to be casting, which is going to be presenting options to the client, which is a lot of back and forth. It's going to be logistics. A lot of these things were already quoted, so we have a rough idea of what they're going to cost, but now it's just basically putting them into action. So it's getting in the models, locking in their time, starting to do wardrobe and getting the client to sign off on that. And this is happening like usually months ahead of time. A lot of times people say like, we need a photo shoot done in like another week. And like, we need a month to start to plan for this stuff. Because again, we're thinking, it's not just like, oh, wear nice clothes. Like we're doing full casting. Like they're gonna have different scenes. They're gonna be wearing different things by the pool and then swimming in the ocean. And then maybe in the lobby for check-in. And then maybe going out for a fancy dinner. And maybe the kids at the kids club are doing something active, going out playing golf or doing some sort of water sports activity. We need to have different outfits for different things and then all the accessories that go along with that. So that's handbags, earrings, different sneakers, and the whole family needs to match in a nice way, so we need a nice color palette for the entire shoot and for each scene separately. So again, a lot of work. So that's why when companies come to us and say like, why can't we just book it and shoot tomorrow or shoot next week? I'm like, well, you can, it's just not going to be done the right way. It's not going to be done up to our standard. And again, people can do this, but we have a certain standard that we believe in, and this is what it takes to do it. So we're always very upfront about like keeping our standard, especially when people have paid us, like this is our standard, this is what we want to deliver, but it's important to always tell them like this is what we need to deliver that. And we try to be as clear about that up front as possible, but a lot of times you have to remind the client throughout the shoot. So all the pre-production is a ton of work. I don't feel like I'm doing enough justice by not spending like a ton of time on it. And then once that's all locked and the dates are sort of secure, then the client wants a schedule ahead of time. And we don't do that as well because we shoot mostly with natural light and we work around the natural light. We don't plan the schedule. This is specifically for resort shoots because it's so dependent on the sun. And yes, we can Photoshop in other skies. And yes, we can use artificial lighting. And sometimes we do, but best case scenario is we want to capture the resort as is, using as much natural light as possible. So we can't deliver them a schedule until I'm on the ground or the photographer's on the ground or the director's on the ground scouting. I mean, that's a big part of what we do. So we need to look, we need to see it for ourselves. What we typically do is we arrive one day, we don't take any meetings that day, no matter what time we get in. We have that as like a travel day for our team. Traveling is exhausting and there's a lot of anxiety that goes along with traveling with all the expensive gear. And then once we arrive, unpacking the gear, organizing the gear, charging the gear, getting it ready. So the day we arrive, we try not to meet with the client. Of course, often we're met in reception and I'm kind of, it's tough because I'm the face of the business and my wife is the face of the business, so one of us has to like kind of show up and talk to them. But we typically try to say like, can we just have a day to ourselves? But people are like eager to get the photo shoot going, so they want to meet, they want to greet. So we try to push into like, okay, yes, we will, but tomorrow we're going to do that. So we arrive one day, the next day what we do is we have breakfast and then we meet with the team, and then we do scouting. And depending on the shoot, scouting can take 1 day or it can take 2 days. If we're doing a video or stills and some of it's offsite, it might take 2 days to scout. So we might have to travel around. If it's just on-site, probably about a day or a half day. We go around with their marketing team, we scout, we look at light. I'd sort of dictate things to the producer, like ideally this room would be done at this time, and then this room ideally at this time, and then they make notes. And then afterwards, we go back to the room, sit down with the producer, and the producer double checks with the photographer, and we do best case scenario. So we say like, okay, these rooms that we think are more important, these rooms really need natural light, these ones we can shoot anytime, and we make a rough schedule based on that. And then that takes like hours. A lot of times too, the client thinks like, oh, that's just, can you just do that in an hour? It takes several hours. So it's like everything is on there. The exact times we're going to shoot, the exact times we're going to move, and calculating how much time it's going to take to move based on the resort. Is it a buggy system? Do we walk? And is it a shot with models? Do we have to change wardrobe? All these things are thought through, and it's very like, it's an art. When my wife puts together the schedule, or one of our producers puts together the schedule, it's a ton of work and a lot of pressure because that's sort of the map for the entire photo shoot. So she puts that together with a list of props, with a list of who's needed for what, and what time they're all going to have to show up, like makeup artists before, models before, photographer can get in at this time, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, 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 because it's a long, detailed list. And a lot of photographers mess this up, so that's a little tip in there. Like, when you do this schedule and you make it so clear, you're saving yourself a lot of headaches, and you're also helping the client a lot too. When they see that you can do this well, like when we do our schedules and present them to the client, oh, this is how it's supposed to be done. I mean, I know I'm tooting our own horn here, but I'm not really doing it myself. It's my wife and our team that does that, but they're amazing at it. And I can't tell you how many times we're complimented on that by the client who's worked on another photo shoot before, and they're like, oh yeah, it was so unorganized, and then the chef hated us, and F&B hated this, and marketing didn't get along because of this afterwards. Everything's very clear, everything's very detailed. That schedule is usually delivered in the evening to the client. So the next day is basically used to, you might think like, oh, you're shooting that day. No, the next day after scouting, after the schedule is done, producer meets with all the heads of departments, goes through everything, make sure there's no questions, and all the preparation's done there. Getting the flowers ready, explaining to people what's gonna be done, where they need to be, at what time, all that kind of stuff. Any questions they have can be answered that day. And then the day after that, we start shooting. So now a typical shoot day for us is we're gonna get up probably early morning. The producers, the makeup artists, and the models are gonna be on set probably a little bit before the photographer. We might give them an extra 30 minutes to sleep. So, but when the photographer gets there, everything should be kind of ready to go. So our shoot days typically happen, early morning, so up at 4:30 or up at 5, depending on where we're at and depending on the sunrise. But sunrise is gonna kind of dictate our day. So, if sunrise is at 5:30, and we might want to start shooting and be ready like at 5, just to make sure. So that might mean getting up at like 4:30 or getting up at 4 for models, for makeup and things like that. So usually shoot in the morning, shoot until the sun gets a little bit harsh, usually around like 8 o'clock, break for breakfast, have a quick breakfast, have a coffee, go back out and shoot until lunch. Then at lunchtime, we take a little bit longer of a break, and that time we use to back up everything from the morning shoot. The photographer will back everything up in 2 locations, and then just a quick double check, like open the images, look at them quickly, make sure there's no problems. And we do that twice a day just because things can go wrong. Things go wrong with the memory card, and you might say like, oh, you'll see that on the LCD screen. Like, yeah, most of the time you will, but sometimes you didn't, or sometimes you have a problem when it loads in. So worst case scenario is we've only lost a half day ever. That hasn't happened, knock on wood, but that's the worst case because we're double checking everything, and we're backing everything up in 2 places too. So we're checking in the afternoon, going through everything in the afternoon. Sometimes a client wants to see things really quickly. I try to stay away from doing that. I try to stay away from delivering dailies. Again, on some shoots, it's impossible. On hotel shoots, I've gotten kind of a system down, and I think I've gotten enough respect now where like I don't feel like I need to earn their trust. Like I feel like if you hired me, I should have your trust. And I know that might sound cocky to some, but it's really gonna slow me down. In the moment, if I'm showing pictures nonstop, it's just going to slow me down. If I have to show you images during the break, you think about getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, that's going to slow me down. It's also just ripe for like miscommunication, like showing a picture that's not edited properly yet because you don't have time to do it, and then that gets sent up to up the chain of command to like a corporate office, like, oh, they haven't removed this, and you create more headaches. Or even at the end of the day, people say like, oh, can you send a shot at the end of the day? People don't realize at the end of the day, by the time we finish, by the time we've had dinner, maybe it's 8, 9 o'clock. By the time we back everything up in 2 places, I've double checked the files, I've opened them up, looked at things carefully, make sure everything's going smoothly, make sure nothing needs to be reshot. It's like 10 o'clock at night, and I gotta get up at 4 the next morning. So I used to in my career, I used to be like very open to sending dailies, and now I'm just kind of like, you gotta kind of trust me, and that's where I'm at in my career right now, but it hasn't always been that way. And when I used to do it, it was a pain, and it did mess me up because I was be up to like 12 o'clock to make sure, okay, just in case someone sees that, let me crop this in, let me remove that quickly, and it just ends up being a lot of work. And that should be done afterwards. And if there's trust there to deliver what's on our website, then I shouldn't have to do that, but that's just my 2 cents. I'm not saying on some shoots, I do shoot tethered. Some shoots, if you're doing a remote shoot and the client can't be there, or client just really, you're only doing like 1 or 2 shots a day, then fine. But the way that I work, 1 or 2 shots a day, or it's like a billboard shot, and you have to have 6 eyes on it, that makes sense. But typically I don't shoot tethered, and typically I don't deliver dailies. Of course there are exceptions, but I also explain on a hotel shoot, the way that I work a scene quite a bit. Like to be tethered by a wire and to slow down that much, the product in the end will be worse. So if you're okay with that, then fine. But again, I've done commercial shoots tethered, and it made sense to have the client there because they really were paying attention to the product. But typically we set up a scene and we dress a scene and say like, okay, this is what we're gonna shoot, like a lobby shot or a scene by the pool. Is there anything you want to change? This is probably what's gonna be in the shot. I might show them quickly, like this is roughly the frame, but then I'm gonna work around a bit. So is everything okay for you guys generally? It's okay for us. Like we'll look at it for them too. Like we have a second set of eyes. The photographer's looking at things, but our producers are looking at things. The prop stylist is looking at things and making sure like we know the brand the best we can. So like we try to think for them. But of course they might weigh in and have some things to say too, and that's fine as well. Okay, I should also mention that we do have a lot of pre-production meetings, and some of those are very necessary. Some of those aren't, some of them kind of overkill. Like often some big brands will have photography guidelines and I'll need to go through those, and I might have some follow-up questions, so I'll go through those offline and then I'll have follow-up questions during our meeting. And then sometimes you go through it all, you don't have any questions, but the client still wants to go through every single line in the PDF of the photo guidelines, even if you don't have any questions, even if it's very clear. But corporate people love meetings. I hate them, but I do my best to be a part of them. So I typically have a creative meeting ahead of time with the client, with our producers, with their team. And then we also have a production meeting where our producers meet with their team as well, just to sort of explain how the shoot's going to go down. So a lot of pre-production calls, some more than others, just kind of depends on the client, depends on the shoot. So that's a typical day. First thing in the morning, shooting like really early, then a quick break for breakfast, and then shooting again, then a backup break in the afternoon and lunch, then shooting until nighttime, then backing up again at nighttime, and then repeat however many days you're doing the shoot. So it can be quite exhausting. You know, we've done shoots that are 3 weeks straight like this. If we're doing like really long shoot like that, like we did in the Maldives, we might take a break like every 10 days or so, or maybe even every 7 days. We're trying to be a little bit better about that, but we used to just kind of work straight through. So after the shoot, when everything's done, we say our goodbyes, we pack everything up, we put hard drives in different bags and with different people just to be safe. You just never know. Someone loses a bag and you've lost an entire shoot. That would just be a nightmare. So we've got multiple hard drives and multiple locations with different people in different bags, if that makes sense. Then we get back home. First thing I do when I get home is back up with our archive manager. So I drop off one hard drive, I give to her, she backs everything up on 2 hard drives, and then one of those hard drives goes off to an undisclosed location we can't tell you about. The other hard drive stays in our office, and then I've kept a hard drive that I'm gonna work off of. Usually I don't start editing the images for like a couple days. I usually need just to kind of like unwind a bit and like be removed from the images. Of course, there are exceptions. If there's a deadline or if I have another shoot coming up that I have to get into, I'll just get right into it and start editing. So the way I edit everything is I throw everything into a program called Photo Mechanic, and I just basically do a color system. So I'll tag like the first selects, like a quick rough view. I'll tag everything red just quickly, just like, you know, get rid of anything that's like overexposed or too underexposed, or I don't like the expression, and I just sort of tag those quickly. Then from there, I'll take that edit. So I use Photo Mechanic, and it's a color filtration system where you can use star filtration system, whatever you want to use. But like basically everything red, I can click on that. It'll show me all my reds, and I'll take my reds and I'll take those down to yellow. And yellow will mean like, okay, these are the images I'm going to send into Lightroom, and these are the images I'm going to tone. So I've separated all my room shots. Those are going to go off to our retoucher because they're composite shots that they're going to put together for us. And I'm going to tone all the lifestyle stuff as far as color goes and get the basic look that we want. And then we're going to I'm going to put those into a folder and then send those over to our archive manager. Our archive manager is going to set up a Dropbox link. Before we send that off to our client, our producer is going to go through, double check, make sure that we didn't miss any of the shots on our list, make sure that I didn't miss anything in my edit, like a bad expression, or someone had like their eyes closed, or something we can't fix in post-production that we don't want, or something with the clothing we can't fix in post-production. So we might just take that out, or she might say like, oh, you forgot, oh, do we have another option like this? So there'll be a second set of eyes before it goes to the client. Once that's all good, we have a rough edit, so we'll call that the first selects. We'll send that off to the client, and then from there, they're gonna pick a certain amount of shots based on what we agreed upon. So let's say they agreed on 50 images. So they'll look at that big chunk of lifestyle images and they'll pick their 50 shots. Or it's a combination of the lifestyle images and then the room shots. The room shots, we typically have a couple different angles for them to choose from. We don't do all the retouching on the room shots until they've selected. So I do a basic retouching of the exposure, but we show them like what it looks like before and after, because people get scared. They don't know that the composite image is gonna be like, everything's gonna be clear outside, everything's gonna be clear inside. So we show them a sample of what it's gonna look like for like one image, so they don't like get all nervous. Then they pick those images, again, a combination of what we agreed upon in the contract. Let's say 50 images, that might be like 20, it might be like 20 room shots and like 30 lifestyle shots. And then often later on, they'll actually buy more images too, because I take a lot of shots and I'm not shooting on my shot list. I have other ideas, and I like photography and I like to shoot, so I might come up with other ideas. And we do actually sell a lot that way. We sell extra images that way often. We send those first selects in a Dropbox link, and then once they've picked those images from that link, we'll do our retouching, so removing everything that we know that they're not gonna like, outlets, plugs, certain little blemishes, or if there's something we talked about on the shoot, like can you remove that car or something like that. And then we send that back to them and see if there's any other final things that we missed. And often at this stage, we kind of know what clients like and don't like, but new clients, you just never know. So typically we've made all the necessary adjustments that we know they're gonna want, but sometimes we might have some extra notes. And we do provide a couple rounds of retouching without any extra fee. Sometimes people get out of hand and they're like, oh, we changed our mind, we want this, this, and this. Then we start to charge extra for that. Again, all that's in the contract. I should also mention too that all the images that we deliver to the client via Dropbox, they're all watermarked. I never give images that aren't watermarked until we get the final payment, no exception. So once those images are signed off on, they're all set, everything's approved, we double check, make sure, because we're not doing any more retouching after that without an extra fee. Once the final 35%, the balance owed to us is paid, transferred to us, like in our account, not said it's in our account, but actually in our account, then we'll transfer the images. Now, occasionally with a recurring client, we might rush 1 or 2 images because they need it for promo. We do stuff like that for good clients. Typically, I try to avoid these things because that leads to like, oh, can we get all of them? And then we don't get the final payment. And it's just hard. Like even big companies, like sometimes they don't pay, and it's actually more complicated to get paid by bigger companies. And we've had great experiences and we've had bad experiences, but we typically have great experiences when we follow our rule, which is don't give anything away, don't do any work until we get our money. That's it. And so that's the case. So we don't give the final images away without the watermark, high res, until we get the money. And then after that, we're not done. After that, once that job is signed off on, once the client gives us approval to post, once they use the images, then we start our sort of promotion of the images, which involves posting daily on Instagram. I do a lot of that myself, so I'll post, you know, behind the scenes stuff. Sometimes we'll do behind the scenes during the shoot if the client's okay with that. Sometimes they want it, sometimes they don't. And then we'll post extra BTS. So I'll do sort of a blast. So I'll do like once a day post on our Mott Visuals Instagram account, some of our favorite images from the shoot. I'll also do a blog post on our website that's good for SEO, and it's just good to have like a sample of some recent client work up there. So I'll do a little write-up, share some pictures or share the video. And then in addition to that, if some of the images are really good, then we might add those to the portfolio. It's a good chance for me to look at our portfolio again and say like, oh yeah, I've improved here, or this shot can replace that shot, or let's just get something fresh in here. This hotel was just so awesome that we want to put that up front in our hotel portfolio. So it's a good way for me to sort of look back at our website, analyze our website, something you should be doing sort of quarterly anyways, and seeing if there's any images that beat your other images, and you should be striving to beat those images always to get better pictures. So that's it from start to finish. You can see a lot goes into. A lot of people think, like clients or even other photographers, like you just kind of show up and take pictures. And it's like, no, on a big commercial shoot, especially if you're like us and you handle production, there's a ton that goes into it, a lot of work before and after. During is just such a small part of it. So our production team does so much work, and people just don't get it until we actually get there and they see our wardrobe room and it's just filled with clothes and accessories and options for like 4 different people. And so much thought, so much work goes into that. So when you handle full production, that's the kind of work that goes into it. Now, not every photographer does that. Not every client requires a photographer to do that. We've just found that that works for us from a business model because we can secure these jobs, we can make more money off the jobs, and it can run smoothly because we handle every single aspect of the job ourselves. So everything is fluid from pre-production to actual shooting to post-production. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions about commercial photography, this one was a long one, but you can ask me in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer your questions. And as always, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to have a wonderful day.